The Green Party has strong policy that supports the right of individuals to choose to die. And as an MP, I've been working with Dignity in Dying to help campaign for a change in the law. Earlier this year, there was a parliamentary debate and vote in which the MPs agreed to back the Director of Public Prosecution's guidelines on assisted suicide. Now, those guidelines, you might remember, made clear that those who compassionately assist a loved one to die at their request are unlikely to be prosecuted, while those clearly who maliciously and encourage the death of another will, of course, feel the full force of the law. Now, those guidelines are so important because they indicate that people who reluctantly assist their dying loved ones to die should not be prosecuted, and it gave hope to high-profile campaigners like Debbie Purdy and many others in similar situations who otherwise need to travel abroad to ensure that their wishes can be carried out without fear of recrimination or persecution for the family or friends who choose to assist them. But whilst that vote in Parliament and the guidelines from the DPP certainly provide greater security to those dying adults who are considering asking loved ones for their help to die, we still urgently need an assisted dying law. A bill has been drafted, which Sarah will say more about, but it's been drafted by the all-party parliamentary group on choice at the end of life, of which I'm a vice chair, and it's been drafted with the help of Dignity in Dying. And the bill builds on the recommendations of the Commission on Assisted Dying and is currently subject to consultation. And the overall aim is to create a robust bill that provides choice, whilst also providing better protection against abuse than the current law does. Lord Falconer is planning to introduce that bill as a private member's bill early next year in the House of Lords. And I think the debate about that bill will be a real important opportunity to debate not just about the right to choice at the end of life, but about what that actually looks like. Should it, for example, include legislation that will only apply to people who are terminally ill? Or should it also include individuals like Tony Nicholson, who was engaged with a lengthy legal bid to end his life when he died a few sad weeks ago? A victim of locked-in syndrome, you'll recall, I'm sure, that Tony referred to his life as, and I quote, dull, miserable, demeaning, undignified and intolerable. But as his condition is not terminal, he wouldn't be covered by the proposed bill. The Green Party position is that Tony and others should be protected by the law, but I know that it's controversial, and I'm sure our speakers may want to say a bit more about that. I think the crucial thing is that we have a debate, an ideally one that is based on evidence and free from dogma. Today is part of that process, so with any further ado, I shall hand over to our speakers, and the first one of those is Bea.
Talk you through this document, which was the final report from the Commission on Assisted Dying, which, as Caroline explained, recommended that there is a problem with the current legal status around assisted suicide, and that there should be a change in the law so that people who have a terminal illness can seek assistance in ending their lives. We spent a year looking through an enormous range of evidence. This included over 1,200 submissions from individuals, all of which you can read on the Commission on Assisted Dying website. On that website you can also watch all of the oral hearings that we had, where we received evidence from high-profile cases, disabled rights campaigners. So Scope, Richard Horton Scope came and talked about the views of their disabled clients. We had experts from medical professionals presenting evidence that they had built up over many years, and we saw both sides of the story. There were also international research visits, including to Oregon, which I'm going to hear more about later. We carried out our own research on suicide and physical illness, and we commissioned external research from experts like the European Palliative Care Association. Now, some of the key findings were that the status quo is not acceptable. The concerns of the Commission were at the moment there's neither sufficient support nor protection for people who might be seeking an assisted death. As yet, with the current DPP guidelines, no one has been prosecuted, and there are a wide range of cases where people may seek to end their lives. So, for example, the case of Daniel James, who was a young man who was paralysed in a rugby accident. He, under the recommendations of the Commission, would not have been allowed to end his life, but he can at the moment. So to say that assisted dying is illegal is wrong, because there are many people who, or there are some people who do end their lives if they've got the support and if they've got the backing. This puts the people who help them to do that in a very difficult situation, because it's not clear what you have to do in order to be classed as assisting someone. If you know that someone is going to Switzerland to end their lives and you are driving them to the airport, is that enough assistance to be investigated? So it's a very unclear and difficult process. There's also evidence that there are different kinds of deaths that we might want to class as assisted suicide that happen in the UK at the moment. Professor Clive Seale, who was a professor at Queen Mary's in London, identified some different cases and the number of times that they occur for ways that people end their lives that we might consider to be an assisted death. So it would also be wrong to say that assisted dying never happens in the UK at the moment, because it does. Demos carried out our own investigative research where we painstakingly trawled through coroner's records looking at cases of suicide. Now this was really difficult to do because coroner's records are very different depending on who's recorded them. It's not always clear why someone's committed suicide, and very often in a case where it is a suicide, it's not investigated in huge amounts of depth. But what we could find quite clearly was that there are about 1 in 10 suicides in the UK every year are committed by somebody who has a terminal or a chronic illness. And we were quite shocked at that. We thought that was quite a high number of people. It's over 400 people every year killing themselves, who potentially driven by the miserable state of their lives because of being severely ill. Some of the external research that was commissioned, I mentioned the European Association of Palliative Care. They looked at countries where some form of assisted dying was legal, and they looked at the quality of palliative care in those countries, and they found that there was no detrimental effect on palliative care in countries that had some form of assisted death legalised. So that was very important for us, because the Commission all along put a very strong emphasis on making sure that, as well as looking at the potential for some form of assisted death, palliative care is crucial to making sure that people have dignified deaths. Some information on public attitudes. Doctors and nurses are cautious, but by no means is there an overwhelming desire to not change the law. In contrast to that, the attitudes of the British public, 80% of people support assisted dying for people with terminal conditions. So that's quite a striking body of evidence from the British public. In conclusion, as I said, the current legal status of assisted dying is inadequate and incoherent. There's a strong case for providing some form of assisted dying to terminally ill people whose suffering is unbearable. Now, terminally ill, that means that you're in the last 12 months of an illness, and it's a way for people to make sure that in those last, whether it's weeks or days, that they have control over when their life is no longer bearable, and that they can spare themselves and their relatives incredibly distressing situations. The Commission also puts forward a very robust framework, which I'll talk you through quite quickly. It's laid out in a huge amount of detail in this, and if you're interested, this report can be downloaded for free, and you can take a look at the detail, right down to how lethal medicine would be stored to make sure that there wouldn't be any abuse or danger of that falling into the wrong hands. And like I said, the Commission was very, very clear that we need improvements in palliative care in this country. So the framework to make sure that vulnerable people were not put at risk through a change in the law, the Commission would like it to only apply to people who are aged 18 or over and who have approximately 12 months to live. It needs to be very clear that the person is making a voluntary choice and is not unduly influenced by other people. It needs to be very clear that the person has mental capacity to make an informed choice and is not suffering from a very strong depression or mental illness that often comes hand in hand with long-term life-threatening illnesses. Now, to make sure that this framework is adhered to, the Commission recommended that 2 doctors be involved in the decision-making process, 1 doctor who knows the family well, 1 doctor who could act as an independent voice and make independent judgments. And the role of the doctors was not just to judge whether that person should be allowed to end their life, but to be there to support them as they go through it and support their family members after they had decided to take their life. It's very clear that the person requiring assistance must be fully informed of all options, all of the other options that they have, and they would like these to be good quality palliative care options. It needs to be very clear that the person has a settled intention to die, that they won't change their mind. There are safeguards so that lethal medication is transported safely and that the person has a safe and supportive death through the support of doctors and other community assistance should that be available and necessary. And they're also very clear that they would like assisted deaths to be reported to a monitoring commission that would review the system. I think it was recommended to be every 5 years, but review the system very closely and make sure that there wasn't any abuse of the system. So that is a very quick summary of what the report says. This is a long version, there's a short version if you want to recap, but like I said, there's a huge amount of detail in there. All of the evidence can be viewed on the website, and I definitely encourage people to go to look at the evidence that we received and to make your own judgments from that.